All right. Let's try this. Okay, so let us proceed. Okay, passive and active study. I'm going to go back into my exercise analogy because it works. So most of us are familiar with exercising. So if I'm in a gym on a treadmill and I'm just walking on a level, okay, I will get in shape, but it takes longer than if I do what's called interval training. Okay, so set the treadmill so I'm going up hills and then take a break. Go up hills, take a break. Or doing that out, you know, walking around your neighborhood or whatever, okay? We call that interval training, and your brain works the same way. Passive study does work, and that's kind of like just reading through your notes, reading through the textbook multiple times. It does work, it just takes longer, okay? So, come on. All right, you good for nothing. There we go. Okay, so active study, okay, is the mental equivalent of interval training, okay? So repetition is big, okay? On average, most of us, when we are learning something that we've heard before, it's something we've learned before, it's familiar information. It only takes 3 repetitions to bring that back up. If it's brand new information, okay, six repetitions, okay. And that's why when we're learning something new, I don't know about you, but back before I learned this, I went, why am I so stupid? Why is this, in, one eye and out the other, one in one ear and out the other? Well, that's how the brain works, okay. The brain needs a certain number of repetitions to convince it that this is something worth keeping. Because otherwise we would remember every meal we ate, we would remember everything we put on, a bunch of things that you don't need to remember long-term. You remember it short-term and then your brain dumps it, okay? It's a way of the brain to declutter itself. But if you've been exposed to something about 6 times, then your brain says, hey, this keeps coming up, this is important, we need to keep it. So it's frustrating, but forgetting is a part of learning. Sorry, that's just the way it is. Okay, so repetition, be aware that you are going to have to go over the information, at least 6 times for most of the information in this course. Okay, and you're normal. It's okay. Spaced repetition. Okay, it's like interval training, or if you're doing, weight training. Generally, most people who do weights, or in my case, physical therapy exercises, you do one part of the body on one day and let it rest, and then you do another part of the body on a different day. So, a lot of times people will do arms one day, and the next day they'll do legs and come back to arms. Okay, it gives your body a chance to rest in between. Your brain is the same way. If you keep trying to go and go and go and go, your brain gets tired and it says, I'm done. And your mind drifts. So spacing the repetition, okay? That way you're giving your brain a chance to rest on that topic in between, and then you come back to it refreshed and it just works better, okay? And that's kind of like with Sarago. About the time you're forgetting, that's about the right time to come back and review the material, okay? So break up your study blocks, okay? And then the last thing is engaging yourself in the learning process, okay? When you engage yourself in the learning process, you remember it longer, okay? So what do I mean? I mean making yourself remember, okay? Coming up with stories for processes, okay? Anything where you have to work a little bit harder, that's engaged active study. So here's the example that I use of what works for me for active study. So back in the day, and you'll understand this, I'll tell this story again when we get to glycolysis in the citric acid cycle. I took one class, we covered the citric acid cycle, we covered glycolysis, and it's like, okay, I've learned it, I can forget this, I'm never going to see it again. And the next class, we covered glycolysis and the citric acid cycle, and it's like, oh dear, I'm going to have to actually learn this stuff. So what I did is I got my textbook, which had the whole cycle and the different pathways with the molecular structures. And what I would do is I would copy it out, looking at the book. And then when I felt like I had it pretty good, then I closed the book and I erased the dry erase board. And then I wrote out as much as I could remember. And it wasn't much the first time. There's a lot of empty spaces and I got a lot of stuff wrong. So what I did is I opened up the book and then went through and filled in the gaps and I corrected the mistakes. So by closing the book, I was forcing myself to remember. And as I went along, I got better and better until finally I got it perfect. And then I waited a day, and without reviewing, without looking at it in the book again, I tried to do it from memory a day later. Okay. What I had perfect the day before, I had blanks again. Okay. But that's active, engaged learning. Anytime you're forcing yourself to remember is engaged. Okay. So that's what works for me. I'm a visual kinetic learner. So drawing stuff out works for me. If you're more of an auditory learner, you may want to set up what I call auditory flashcards. That's where, you're talking into your phone and say you explain a process, or you say something like glycolysis or eukaryotic cells. Then you pause and then you give the definition so that while you're driving in your car or you're doing something else, you hear eukaryotic cells. Then you can say what you remember before you hear the answer. Okay. In both situations, you're forcing yourself to remember, to either say or draw or write down what you remember. Okay. All right. Any questions about the difference between passive and active study? Uh-oh, I'm not seeing anybody move.
And there she goes again.
Did it do it again?
You're kind of back, but you almost look like you're frozen.